Welcome to the Religious Treehouse. I'm Jody.
And I'm Matthew.
And today is a very exciting day. Not only just because we get to be here together, but we're going to talk about Scientology. But first things first, Matthew, how are you?
I'm good. I'm doing good. Started reading a new book. Getting into some New Testament stuff. Haven't done that in a while, so it's fun to jump into that for once in a good hot minute. But what have you been up to?
I feel sick,
Hmm.
and I really have just been thinking about life and everything and what different directions people can take in their lives, which I think brings us to Scientology. What do we need
Yeah,
to think about before we can even discuss this, though?
yeah. No, I think it's kind of funny that we've chosen Scientology as like our first non-Bible episode, due to like how controversial it is. But like I think it'll be fun and hopefully it'll go good. But with something as controversial as Scientology, some like pre-notes I think should be said. First of all, I have a master's degree in religious studies. It's highly emphasized in Hebrew Bible and stuff like that. But I've still studied religion and I've taken classes that have like brought up Scientology and stuff. So like I know stuff about this. I don't think I'm entirely unqualified to talk about this. Um, and that being said, like most of my knowledge about Scientology has come from it being brought up as like a tangent in some classes and stuff. And I've read the Hugh Urban's book, The Church of Scientology, which is 10 or 15 years old. So my information's a little dated. I'll give us that, but I think it'll still be enough to talk about this genuinely. Jody, would you like to note your sources as well for here?
My sources include People Magazine, TikTok, TMZ, the actual Scientology website, and I have a degree in integrative studies. So basically, that just means I studied anthropology, sociology, and international studies. I'm very interested in why people do things, and Scientology is one of those things that I've always been like, why are people doing that? Why that thing? Matthew used to live in California. I live in California, and driving by the celebrity Scientology building is something I enjoy doing. So those are my sources.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be very fun because I think we're coming from very different perspectives and looking at this, so that'll be great.
Yeah.
But also before we really get into the meat of it, I think Scientology as like a topic provides like a good starting point into alternative religious movements and like modern religious movements. Like first of all, because it's somewhat well known as this new religious movement, but also it can help us understand perhaps how older religions that we talk about much more frequently, how those might have formed and started and been perceived. So I think Scientology acts as a good test case to talk about these things. But with dealing with these new religions, I think it's also important to have a few questions going in the back of our mind that I think Scientology can help us talk through. First of all, how do we define religion and who gets to define it? I think that is really important, especially in the case of Scientology. And also, what's at stake at claiming something is religious or not. Um, Also, in regards to Scientology, like how should we ethically study a religion who prides itself on like its religious practices being so secretive? Like, what's the right way to address this? And lastly, why do these religious movements bring up such strong emotions? Like, why is this so controversial? What makes us think about that? And because it brings up these such strong emotions, I think in addressing these religions, we first need to be very respectful of Scientology, of all religions, but we should also be critical of these new religious movements. And at the same time, we should recognize the critics uh, of Scientology, of alternative religious movements, and also be critical of those skeptics as well. So to really look at this generously and critically at the same time, I think is necessary for studying all religious movements.
So to be open and guarded.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, to be respectful and standoffish, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, with something so controversial, it's safe to assume that you can't believe all you hear from the critics, and it's also safe to assume that what you hear from the group is heavily biased, and that applies to all religions.
Yep. I would agree. So Scientology, it was founded by this guy, L. Ron Hubbard, and it was founded about 70 years ago, would you say, Matthew?
Yeah,
So but first, no, this is the most interesting thing about L. Ron. This guy holds the Guinness World Record for the most written pieces, or is it published pieces of literature?
yeah, something like that. Like he was a big time writer. He wrote a lot and he wrote quickly.
Yeah, and it was a sci-fi. So he had a wild and vivid imagination. And to me, it's no wonder he got around to creating his own religion, because when you got that much imagination, you need somewhere to put it.
Yeah, no, he's definitely, one of the most prolific sci-fi writers of the pulp fiction era of, the early to mid 1900s. But I think also during that time, there's, this kind of there's two stories that we have of L. Ron Hubbard. We have the Scientology story, and we have the story of the, scholar that kind of looks at L. Ron Hubbard. Oh, and the church calls him this world traveler, this explorer, an engineer, humanitarian, philosopher, educator. He's this, larger than life figure, which is to be expected, who travels to the Far East and studies religion there, was a war hero and for the army. And, he's this larger than life, huge figure that is meant to evoke these emotions and is highly respected by Scientologists. Um, and he has multiple degrees and stuff. But I mean, that's according to the Scientology literature. If you look at the literature outside of that, um, most of his academic degrees are either from unaccredited universities or just entirely fictional. I think he was discharged from the army. I don't remember what branch he was in, but he was discharged for firing on an island when he shouldn't have. Um, but so there's this disconnect from the academic story of L. Ron Hubbard and the Scientology story of L. Ron Hubbard. But I think, and that's where a lot of critics get at this, like, oh, the L. Ron Hubbard's not who he says he is. That must be built on lies and stuff. And perhaps, but I think if we look at the story that Scientology tells, it clearly follows the hero's journey. Like it depicts this guy as expressing something more than just basic history. Like his history that has been formulated by Scientology is this larger than life story. And I think that has to do with his experience in sci-fi and writing. Like he's this great writer that was respected for years and years as an author. And I think part of the reason Scientology was so successful is because of the testament of that myth and storytelling has to the human. It's how we understand the world through myth and story. And Hubbard was great at telling those stories about his religion, and great about telling those stories about his life. And it makes them really compelling, and it makes it really, a really good way to understand how the world works, and it makes for a good religion. And this is why other religions work too. It tells a compelling story.
Mhm.
The Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, like they all have a compelling story that helps the religious adherent make sense of the world. And I think that's exactly what's going on here with Hubbard.
Yes, but unfortunately for Hubbard, we now can fact check, and he's more labeled a con man because of the lies about his background. Because if someone's not being truthful about their background, then how can you really trust them with the development of a religion? I think is what the critics would say.
Right. Yeah. No, definitely. And this is why again going back to what I'm more versed in. Like this is why when you have people talk about the historical Jesus versus the biblical Jesus, a lot of more fundamentalist Christians get really touchy about talking about what a historical Jesus might have done and thought versus what the Bible depicts Jesus as doing and thinking. Um, and there's a lot more speculation given that that was 2,000 years ago than the records that we have now. But this theme of a con man starting a religion, like it may be true, but it may also, regardless of if he's a con man or not, I think he still created something that has meaning for some people and is
Yeah,
doing something. Yeah.
definitely. So, what did he create? I know he wrote the book Dianetics. It became a bestseller, like outsold so many books. An Olympic athlete even attributed his success to Dianetics. What did Dianetics say?
Yeah, so Dianetics was a bit of it kind of went away from his sci-fi writings, I think. I haven't read Dianetics, so hearing from secondary sources here, but it talked more about the human mind. I think the subtitle is The Science of the Human Mind or something like
Mm.
that. And it was an attempt to synthesize a lot of philosophical and psychological and spiritual ideas to try and create this new science of the mind that would act as a scientific or is more pseudoscientific um, investigation into how to improve oneself and become a better person. And like in that, it was highly critical of religion. And it's not until much later, throughout the years, that Scientology has become much more affirming of religion and itself as a religion.
It had to have been a comfort probably to some people around the time it was released, which I can only guess because I'm not sure, but like there'd been world wars, the Great
Hmm.
Depression, like all these people had lived through all this strife, and you're looking for answers to life through your entire life. And this guy comes out with this book talking about the power of your mind. You don't need to go to someone else. It's something you can help yourself with. That must have been very appealing.
Yeah, no, and I think you can't really separate Scientology from the era that it was in. Formulated. Yeah, I think I don't remember when Dianetics was written, but I think it was in like the 40s. When World War II was happening, and then following. I think Hubbard died around I want to say 1986. I could be off by a few years, but essentially, Scientology and Hubbard existed at its peak during the Cold War. So I think we can't separate those two completely. I think there's definitely correlations, but I think we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
Before we get into some more timelines of the history, it might be helpful to talk about some of the more popular, well-known practices and beliefs.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you want to get us started?
So, we're going to talk about this. How does one get into Scientology?
Yeah.
Okay. First things first, now I'm not telling you where to go, but I will tell you that if you want to enter into Scientology, the first thing you do is take the Oxford Capacity Analysis. It used to be called the American Psychology Analysis. It is not scientifically proven. It is not. Don't use it as a diagnosing device. But you get audited by one of their auditors and they look at your graph and they see through your answers points in your life where you may be lacking in things such as confidence or love, things like that. You then, that's your free one. That is your free test. Okay. After that, to get audited, it is $50 an hour, and they use an e-meter. Now, I'm not exactly sure how an e-meter works physically, but it does the same kind of reading. And when they're using the e-meter, they're testing for engrams. Is
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
correct? Okay. And they talk you through, and you have to work through these engrams because they're blocking Satan. This is
I
where I
think
get
so.
fuzzy.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so with auditing, it's the goal of Scientology, is to become clear, and that means to remove all of the Engrams from you, and to achieve this operating Thetan, which once you achieve that, you can theoretically create universes, create worlds, and have like complete control of like yourself, and it helps you become, as you say, people have attributed it to becoming um, athletes and like help with your job and all these things. Um, and the way that you get rid of these Engrams or points of you know loss or hurt or pain or bad things in your life, and as Scientology developed, at Engrams attached from past lives as well, that developed through from Eastern religions. But the goal is to get rid of these Engrams, and to do that was through this process called auditing that you mentioned. And what happened is you held onto this metal device thing called an e-meter, um, and that measured electrical impulses. And like as we'll see through a lot of this, there's a lot of like attempt to like make this religion scientific. So it uses scientific devices, and it claimed to be using e-meters was said to be like more accurate than psychoanalysis because we used science and I could measure your electrical pulses. To me, it sounds like a rudimentary form of a lie detector of some sort,
Mm.
where it picks up on electrical pulses doing something in your body when you feel when you talk about something that brings up bad emotions, something happens. I think that's the theory behind it.
Yeah.
I think Hubbard went as far as to claim that it was so accurate that if you hooked it up to a tomato plant, you could hear the tomatoes scream when they were sliced, which I think was kind of funny to think about, like, because like I haven't in all of my research, I haven't like heard any of the um, teaching of Scientology to be that. Well, vegetarian wouldn't even work there because they're still making the tomatoes scream. um, but but that I think that is to show like how precise that they see this device.
Yeah.
And they use this device to audit and get rid of Engrams and hopefully become a better, full, happier person that isn't held back by these nasty past losses and hurts.
Yeah. I think it is important to note that the e-meter was kind of being pushed and presented to the medical community at first, and they were like, no, this is not a medical device. And that's kind of what led to the switch to religion, but we'll touch on that later. But just so everyone knows,
Yeah.
that's not the e-meter's original intention was medical.
Yeah, and the FDA said, no, no, this isn't, we're not getting this through our scientific trials. It's not working. Because it claimed to heal all sorts. Because Scientology sees these Engrams as being the cause of physical and mental ailments. So, like, he claimed that this would solve things as far as arthritis to, all sort of other, um, all sort of
Ailments.
other things, ailments.
Yeah.
So when the FDA heard that, they thought, maybe not. Let's take a closer look at this. So it has been marketed as a strictly religious device, which is how it's used now.
So a Thetan, what is that?
Um, so Thetan is our true identity and immortal self that has unlimited capabilities that can do whatever. It can do literally whatever. Um, I think in the early 50s, Hubbard had claimed to discover and isolate it. I don't know how he would do that because he describes it as like the state of pure consciousness with no physicality, um, originating. Oh, I'm going to get this part wrong. But, there's one story that I've heard that goes something like this. Like, I'm going to get some details wrong, but hear me out. Hundreds and hundreds of thousand years ago, there was this secondary universe that was being eaten by our universe or something like that. And that universe was inhabited by Thetans. And then Thetans, when absorbed by this universe, had moved over to our universe. And then eventually, hundreds and hundreds of thousand years later, Thetans made it to Earth, which is why we're inhabited with Thetans. And also, Thetans are globbed onto us, which is another thing that auditing gets rid of. It gets rid of Engrams and the bad Thetans. I think. This, I'm not certain about. It's a little confusing, but I think it goes something along those ideas. But the idea of the Thetan is that it's this untapped potential self that can do anything as far as creating new universes, and that's what we're trying to find, um, and expand so that we can do whatever we want. And I think like it goes as far as to say like if you can like see through walls, even the CIA and Scientology, despite Scientology's problems with FBI and all those types of things, CIA at times was kind of buddy buddy with Scientology when they were doing things like remote viewing and trying to figure that stuff out. Again, that might go into the realm of speculation, but interesting things that I've found.
Yes, and there is one part of that story I do remember, and it's that they dropped the Thetans into a bunch of volcanoes. And then when the volcanoes exploded, that's when the Thetans got everywhere. And when someone's born, a Thetan attaches to you.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes and like this resembles like early Christian Gnostic ideas of like the divine spark and the soul trapped in the cosmos. So like this isn't I mean the specific details and stuff are unique to Scientology, but like the general idea of this stuff isn't, completely out there in terms of, being new and unique to the realm of religion.
No, I've actually read a book that is very similar to this. I don't think it was inspired by Scientology, but it's called The Host. It's by Stephanie Meyer. She wrote Twilight, if you haven't heard of it. But basically, these little things attached to people, and the people that existed, they go away, and the host takes over. So it's very common idea, I would say.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Or at least not uncommon.
Not uncommon, So Zenu, that's a name I keep seeing.
Yeah. So Xenu is, I think one of the most infamous um beings, ideas, concepts thrown about by especially anti-Scientologists. Like, what is this crazy idea? Um, and I think the Xenu is blown up is as its like level of relevance. I think as outsiders we look at this story and say, "Whoa, that's crazy." Whereas from what I understand, inside the religion, Xenu is not this big idea, or as big of an idea as we tend to conflate it as, because you don't learn about Xenu until you're operating Thetan level 2 or something, which means that you've been in Scientology for a good long while and you've put a lot of money into it, you put a lot of time and effort, and you're like, this is my thing, this is doing good things for me, I'm happy here. Which is how Scientology is structured. You rank up in levels and become more aligned with it. Um, but if I remember correctly, Xenu, there's a few stories, but the one that I'm most familiar with is that 75 million years ago, Xenu was the dictator of the Galactic Confederacy, and his problem was overpopulation. He said overpopulation is bad, so he said, how do we solve this problem? We send a bunch of people to Earth. So and I think this is the point where you get to Thetans.
Mm.
The Thetan story is combined where volcanoes explode and hydrogen bombs. Um, and that's how the Thetans became attached to modern humans.
Mm.
So, it's this weird story. And I think, this shows the connection of sci-fi, like Elrond's, obsession and, skill with sci-fi, and how most of the early adapters of Scientology were also big fans of sci-fi. Like the way that this tells stories, this creates meaning, isn't completely uncommon to the early adapters of Scientology. And this would, maybe not make sense, but it would be expected as a way to tell a story and to make sense of the world. Like this, as an origin story, wouldn't be that far out there. Just as, an origin story of talking animals may feel a little bit out there, still we can make sense of.
I think it's a pretty cool origin story.
Yeah, no, it's fun.
It's
I like it.
very interesting. And I mean, when you really sit and you just think about the belief of Scientology that you can go to like-minded people, they can help you figure out where you are lacking in your life, and they can help you process through it in a way that enriches you, and you have this just community of like-minded individuals. You can see the appeal.
Hmm.
It's the sense of growing better to be better together.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's like the only reason it sounds absurd to the outsider is because it's not something that you're familiar with. Like, I mean, again, going back to Christianity as what we know best, being, your average Americans, um, like to outsiders, to those not grown up in Christianity, the stories that it tells, like it feels absurd and crazy. Um, so I think the craziness and wildness of a story shouldn't be used to discredit a religious practice or a religious belief. Um, I think it just adds to the intrigue of it, and I think it's much more helpful not to ask is this true, is this correct, but to ask what does this tell us about the religion? What does that tell us about how they perceive the world?
Yeah, because I mean, there are people who did leave Scientology, but Scientology helped them to become sober.
Mm,
Scientology helped them out of a depression. Scientology helped.
mm,
And I think you can say in any religious organization there are bad apples, but when someone has a belief system and a religion and it helps enrich their life, you can't discount that.
yeah.
Something I found really cool in the research about Scientology is that the modern symbol is two triangles interlocked with an
Mm,
S. The first triangle is called the arc triangle, and the arc triangle focuses on affinity, reality, and communication. And the idea is that as you expand one of these, so do the others. So the more you effectively communicate, the more your reality and your affinity for other people expands. The more you have an affinity for other people, that expands reality and communication. And then the KRC triangle, which is knowledge, responsibility, and control. And again, the more you can grow one, the more the other two grow. And I really like that idea of like when you're expanding one part of your life, it's not just one part, it's multiple parts.
mm,
So I definitely think there are a lot of great things that can be taken away. Um, but if we want to get to the tippy top of this belief system, which I do, we have the Sea Org, which started as L. Ron's personal navy.
Mm.
And number one, baller move to have a personal.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
But also they had to sign a billion-year contract.
Yeah.
That is a lot of years. Like in order to get into Sea Org, you have to be at the very top of Scientology.
Mhm.
And you're pretty much just in the penthouse with your billion-year contract, or out at sea, I guess, with your
Yeah,
billion-year contract.
wasn't it invite only or something along those
Mm-hmm.
lines?
Yep. Invite only, and you get to be a part of every conversation that trickles down. So, yeah, I have a lot of admiration, but also a billion-year contract.
Yeah. No, and with like I feel like we've talked about a lot of the positive aspects of Scientology, but one of the big critical points of Sea Org is how it is perceived as a authoritarian um, regime where its people lose you know autonomy. And there's um, a lot more things that we would consider to be sketchy happening here.
Like that second triangle, because I was smiling through it, but the fact that the second triangle is knowledge, responsibility, and control is if I was on a dating app and Scientology was like, these are my two triangles, swipe left or swipe right, I'd be like, red flag. Control? Absolutely not.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's I'm as I said, my sources come from I think 2011, so I don't know if that symbol was up yet, or if it was, it wasn't as prevalent. So I'm I'm speculating here,
Yeah.
but I would assume that the control aspect is much more of controlling yourself, controlling the thing, and all that stuff.
Oh, well, that makes more sense.
But but I also think, if it even if it were about this, control in this negative sense, I think that can be good for some people. I think some people need or look for that lack of, it makes it easier if they don't have to make choices, if they just do what they're told, believe what they are told to believe. And I think some people just want that in a religion. It makes their life better. They don't have to like make these tough choices. So, teach their own, teach their own until it becomes, a human rights violation, which that has been accused. So we'll talk about that, I'm sure.
Get that on a bumper sticker. To each their own until a human rights violation.
Yeah.
All right. So, general timeline of Scientology, because this did not just come up out of the blue. He writes Dianetics. He's like, please, please let me medically practice this. Please let
Yeah.
me use my e-meter to help people. And they're like, no, sir, you cannot. So what does he do?
Mhm. Yeah, he's Elron, has been accused from the beginning, from his children, from former members, from those close to him, that he was looking for a way to make money. That he's been accused of saying like if he wants to become rich, he would start a religion. From like way back when. And so like the idea of him creating a religion just to make money may not be far fetched. Um, but I think that doesn't necessarily mean that the religion is false per se, nor that the religion doesn't help people. There's plenty of people propagating tons of religions out there. That part of that religion is to make money. That's not a new idea. Look at Joel Osteen and your mega church pastors. Um, so if Hubbard started this as a way to make money, I don't think it would be go. I don't think it would be too far to say that he also genuinely wanted to help people. He wanted to make stuff better. I can't speak for him. I don't know for sure, but I think it's a genuine possibility that he was actually trying to improve the world around him, or at least improve himself through these practices.
In the documentary I watched, they talked a lot about how L. Ron's own search for his own diagnosis may
Mhm.
have led quite a bit of the development he did, because he, especially at the end, he thought there may have been something wrong with him, and he started
Mhm.
kind of like ramping up the technology they had to diagnose himself because he was having his own mental health issues.
Yeah, yeah. So it makes sense that this religion would be created to, you know, help him and help others. So I don't think that would be. I think that's us being very, generous and respectful of the religion, whereas critics would say, no, this is just a con man.
Don't you
But
worry, critics, you will have the final 10 minutes.
but he goes on from that. He with problems from the FDA saying no, this is not a medical device. From that point on, they tried to push what Hubbard called the religion angle, which was um, to make Scientology much more like a religion, and they did that through integrating Eastern religious practices into it. They started wearing clerical vests for auditing and stuff like that. So like they gave off the illusion, the perception of being religious, particularly being Christian, because that's what America sees religious as. They see it as being Christian. So they're saying if we can look kind of Christian or kind of religious, then it'll pay off. But I think, like, as I said earlier, we can't separate Scientology from the Cold War from post-war America, because I think we see at that time an explosion of the religious marketplace, where we see all of these alternative religious movements pop up that draw so many people into it, and it's this time of unrest and unsure about what's going on with the world. Is the world going to end? Are we going to all die in a nuclear explosion? And I think if we see those concerns as the backdrop of what was propelling this religion, it makes a lot more sense. Scientology is so focused, there's so much focus on um, being secret and um, keeping their information private. And I think that closely resembles the thoughts of like spying in that era of, you know, spying on Russia and all those things. So by emulating that, I think it gave this sense of security, the sense of, oh, okay, this is a mirror of what's happening to the world. So they followed this, idea of, oh no, the world is ending, and to have part of their origin story of the volcanoes being exploded by hydrogen bombs, that's directly corresponding to the fears of the nuclear bombs being exploded by Russia or America. So yeah, and Scientology was heavily anti-communist and all those things. So it did a lot to appeal to the general discomfort of the era, and I think it's a both and. Scientology responded to the Cold War era, and the Cold War era formed Scientology in that sense. Does that make sense, kind of?
It does, but also the secrecy just really feels off, especially in this day and age
Mm.
when, you know, we've had such cult disasters, that it have ended with people harmed. And, there is that concern when something is so secret, like what is happening behind closed doors. So I understand why it is that way, but it comes off as toxic in today's environment.
Yeah, yeah, and especially so when Scientology was on the rise, when the Manson murders happened in '69, and the People's Temple in '78, like those are definitely on the minds of many Americans and many people in the world at that time. And that, I think is also what attributes to a lot of the skepticism and fear of Scientology because it grew up around the same era of um, even Waco with the Branch Davidians. Like all of that is happening around the same time. So it definitely makes sense why so many would be, at the very least, fearful.
Cautious, judgmental. There's just such a wide array of feelings for Scientology.
Mhm.
I mean, there's people getting harassed today. Like the Gen Z is not putting up with this from what I've seen on TikTok.
Mhm.
Like Scientology will open up places to audit people, and Gen Z has been, and even millennials, I guess, but they've started noting people who go in and have shown concern if they don't see them around again. Like if it's someone who commonly is on a certain street and they recognize that this person went into the Scientology building one day and they don't see them anymore.
Interesting. I mean, I have no idea. I've never heard of this.
Yeah,
That could
okay.
just it
I
could be confirmation bias or something along
yeah.
those lines. But yeah, no, there's this milieu of conspiracy always around it. I I visited New York a few months ago, um, and we were talking to some random dude on the street. He like gave tours of like Central Park and stuff. So he was like pointing like at the buildings around, and he said, "This is where Beyonce used to live. This is where so and so used to live." And then he pointed at another building. He said, "This is where the Scientologists sacrifice children." And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" So like, there's this definite idea of you know controversy around Scientology that is still very prevalent around so many people.
Wow. What a welcome to New York. Oh,
Yeah.
golly. And they finally achieved tax exempt status though. They pulled off the religion thing enough.
Yeah. Yeah. So 1993, I think it was 93. So this is after Hubbard is gone. Is this David Miscavige running it now?
Yes.
Yeah.
And David was the one who announced to the Scientologists that L. Ron Hubbard was on a mission. That,
Hmm.
like, I watched the video of him telling them that L. Ron Hubbard had passed away. And I have to say, I found, looking at it through the lens of the religion, the wording was beautiful. He
Yeah.
has ascended this life and gone to another one, kind of thing.
Hmm.
Looking at it from someone who is just really, I'm just not as religious anymore, I was like, this guy is kooky. He is kooky. Like, just say he died. Why are we drawing it out like this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Because what was it? He's left his body to go to another planet to study or something along those lines.
yeah.
Yeah, and like the home where Hubbard died in is like when in undergrad, if I visited home, I would like go through the city where Hubbard's house was that he died, and like he went to the hospital, like at the hospital across the street from one of my first apartments in undergrad, which I think is real funny. But like they have this they haven't touched anything in that house of his because they think one day they're saving for him for when he comes back, um, which is a fun idea.
That's
uh,
actually really cute. That is so cute. It's a little sad when people pass away. You do have to release to get rid of those emotions, but that's kind of cute.
yeah, but anyways, tax exempt in
Yeah.
1993. Yeah, I think it's this is where the idea of what makes something a religion comes into play because so many people call Scientology a cult. And I have a problem with cult because I think cult just if you say cult, that means it's a religion you don't like. Um, and I think that just has negative connotations. We can get into my theory on cult later, but as an alternative religious movement, as I prefer to call it, um, it achieved tax exempt status in 1993, but because of it being a religion. But there's nowhere in the US government that has a place to define religion. Like effectively, the only place that defines religion is the IRS. And I think it's so funny that we define religion effectively in America by the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. It's a funny department to give that authority to for some reason.
I mean, you're right, but also like I can't think of another section of the government that I want to define it,
Yeah.
especially in today's mega church era.
Mhm.
Um, but I have my own feelings on religion and taxing and
Yeah.
things like
Oh,
that.
right. Because like religion, Jay-Z Smith, he like one of the big scholars of religions, like says like religion is a product of the academy. Like we can only define religion in the sense of how I think I have his quote somewhere um, that uh, religion is solely the creation of the scholar's study. Religion has no independent existence apart from the academy. And we'll have to do an episode at some point about talking about what is religion. But like, it's so impossibly hard to define religion because it encompasses so much. And then if you have the definition be so broad, it encompasses a lot of things that we wouldn't naturally consider as religion. So what makes something a religion? We don't know. The IRS does, though. That's who we trust to define religion. Uh,
Take my money, define religions. The
yeah,
IRS coming to check you today. Um, I mean, but religion and politics, especially right now, I feel like, I don't know, I need more divide. Don't let the IRS define religion.
yeah,
Let people define religion. And then when they commit a crime or a human rights violation, then we can discuss. Because,
yeah.
I mean, who's really being harmed in a religious practice that is fully invested in itself in bettering other people? I mean, really, as long as you're not hurting anyone, believe what you
Right.
want.
Sure, sure. That being said, I know that you wanted to end this discussion with some of the conspiracy theories that you found in your very you know professional study and unbiased representation of Scientology that you've been going through.
Yeah.
So please share some of the conspiracy theories that you found, and maybe we'll talk through them a little bit.
Operation Snow White. I'm just going to start with the hard hitter. It was an
Okay.
infiltration into 136 government agencies, foreign embassies, and private organizations that were critical of Scientology in more than 30 countries. During the infiltration, Scientologists purged records and wiretapped. It was a spy program that robbed, wait for it, the IRS.
Isn't isn't this the one where there were like two guys who were record keepers or something, and they would like slowly siphon confidential records to Scientology?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, as I said, like there's this obsession with spy novels and that of the Cold War. I think this would be perhaps appealing to many people in the organization of like figuring all this out. So I don't know. I've never heard this one in too much detail, but it seems because didn't they get raided like after this or before it or something? Yeah. So yeah, they've done some sketchy things.
That would be a very sketchy thing. This was the one I didn't know a lot about. Connor had to teach me about it. He's like, let's sit, let's read. He's like, you're talking about Scientology, you're addressing this. And I was like, okay. all right. And then reading what happened, I'm like, okay, yeah, I want to be James Bond. I want to be 007.
Mm.
But to actually do it, the cojones one must
Yeah.
have. But honestly, after robbing the IRS, I am shocked they ever became tax exempt. Um,
Yeah.
oh, L. Ron Hubbard was accused of fraud or something. There was a money thing with him though, and he left the country at one point, yes? And that's when he made Sea Org.
I don't know. That's not
It's
ringing a bell for me, but tell me about it.
he did flee the country. L. Ron Hubbard
Okay.
fled the country at one point
Okay.
because I don't think he was paying taxes. And so he went somewhere else. And that's, I think, when they created Sea Org and the Navy because they were just in international waters. Because as one knows, when you have money and people are after you, you sit in international waters.
Sure. Yeah.
But I
No.
could be wrong.
Right.
I
No,
could be,
that makes sense. Because like I
yeah.
know when he died in California, he had been in somewhat of hiding. Like I don't think he was in like actual hiding, but he was, stepping back from public light for to be intentional about that. So it makes sense. But again, we're in the conspiracy theory section of the show. We are not. I'm not saying that any of these things happened. This is from the documentaries and People magazines that Jodie has read.
Guys, I have been reading this stuff since I was a young child. 13 years old, I knew what was going on with Katie Holmes and Tom Cruise. Do you? I won't even get started on the Adam Sandler, Jack and Jill, him hiring. I'm getting started on it. So, Adam Sandler, there's this theory that he made a movie to help pay Katie Holmes so she could leave Tom Cruise because it was notoriously very difficult for her. And this is all things that are like, and I feel dirty saying this because it is their private life, but it was something she talked not no, she didn't really talk about it. She didn't really say anything, but you could tell a lot was happening. And he's very high up in Scientology, as we know, which brings me to my next point.
Tom Cruise, not Adam Sandler.
Not Adam Sandler, Tom
Yeah,
Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
Adam Sandler is a gem and a jewel. But Tom Cruise, yes. My next point. I've been having this thought because they're like, oh, our lives, our careers are getting better. Are your lives and careers not getting better because of the mass amount of funds in Scientology to ensure that they do get better and kind of help along the process? Because they one of their golden trophy of like, look at what Scientology does is John Travolta. He
Mm.
was brought into Scientology when he first started acting. He started studying the religion, and suddenly he was blowing up. This man was in everything. And it probably helped that there was a bank of high profile people who were a part of Scientology, making sure Johnny gets this role. That's just a theory, though.
Yeah, I think I've also read lots of reports of, your average everyday person who joins Scientology. And they, people that we wouldn't assume there would be conspiracy to make them successful. And they said it's done great things for their life. It made them happier and healthier. And, it's done great things for their job and stuff with that, people who aren't in the public light. Um, so like perhaps, but I think your average everyday person who joined Scientology and was happy with it would also say these things, and I don't think they would necessarily have been bought by Scientology to improve their lives like that. Again, we're in the conspiracy theory section.
I know you're fighting this so hard, but it has to happen. We're doing the Scientology episode. We could cut this out at the end and no one would know. We could we'll just make her, I don't know. I'm feeling very self-conscious about this now. All I want to leave you with is Leah Remini, just that name. She spent 30 years in the church and left in 2014 and has been very vocal. And now that I've done this, I do want to read a paragraph I wrote, since I'm either going to have to read this paragraph or apologize. I would like to apologize to anyone I offended with my conspiracy theory section and say, I can see what would be appealing about a religion like Scientology. The idea that with use of a machine, someone can pinpoint what inside of me is lacking and help me to fix it is very appealing. And then through manifestation, the placebo effect, or the secret method, whatever have you, you see results because you have a community made up of wealthy and well-connected individuals. Oh no, I made the paragraph insulting too. I'm sorry. But these are all conspiracy theories, and mad respect to Scientologists to improving your life. I have the utmost respect because I can't seem to improve much.
In summary, throughout this episode, we have outlined the history of Scientology, how it became the religion it is today, with some of their major beliefs, and how it can do lots of good for people. And we've also outlined some of the conspiracy theories, and we've noted many of the critics of Scientology. It's up to the viewer or listener to determine, is this a religion? Is this good or bad? But regardless, and I think we'll close on this, regardless for future conversation on this, I think thinking about Scientology as an alternative new religious movement can be very beneficial and helpful in understanding, what is a religion, how do religions work, how do they start, and all those, types of things. And, again, it's important to consider why people feel so passionate about this, what makes these stories, whether the story is told by Scientology or whether the story is told by the critics of Scientology, what makes those stories so compelling. And, it's worth considering. It's worth thinking about. Jodie, do you have any closing thoughts, or are we good?
I feel like I should stop talking before I dig us a hole we cannot get out of. Thank you for watching The Religious Treehouse. It was so fun sitting with you.
Yep. All right. Follow us on, Twitter and Instagram and all those places. Rate and review us.
Maybe not this one. Bye.
Bye.
I'm so sorry.